of the board, and I call this meeting to order. We welcome all board members, advisors, staff, and on-site visitors and online listeners and Twitter followers. I remind our audience and those listening that this body meets monthly, and as a reminder, this month our committee reports will span both days due to a needed longer closed session for the board yesterday. Today we'll conclude our committee reports and vote on any items needing action that's been presented for this August 7th and 8th, 2019 meeting. And I also remind our on-site visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to SBE meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. And if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair, and it will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Since our last meeting, many of our year-round and modified calendar schools have started another school year with students. When we return for our September meeting, our traditional calendar schools will also be in session. And we want to wish a successful year to all of our students, teachers, staff, administrators, superintendents, and parents, and others that will serve public school students during the 2019-20 school year. At this time, I'll call on my colleague, Mr. Duncan, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Seated. Thank you, Mr. Duncan. One of the unique features, I think, of this board is the contributions that we receive from advisors who represent our students and teachers and parents across the state. And today we have the distinct pleasure of welcoming three new advisors to the board. Dr. Patrick Miller is the Superintendent of the Year and Superintendent of Greene County Schools. Mr. Matthew Bristow Smith, the 2019 Principal of the Year, and the 2019 Teacher of the Year, Miss Mariah Morris. Before we ask them to come forward for a photo, I'd like to give each of them a chance to make any remarks that they'd care to make. Dr. Miller.
I'd just like to say I'm honored to have been selected Superintendent of the Year, and this is one of the perks of the job. Looking forward to serving for the next year. Thank you very much.
Same here. I'm truly excited about the work of the board. I've met some fantastic people over the last 6 to 8 weeks, especially interested in the 5-year strategic plan that we're going to be learning about today. Could not be more excited about goal number 1, reducing opportunity gaps. Thank you.
I too am very honored to be here serving on the board as an advisor, and it was so nice to meet you all yesterday, and I look forward to a productive 2 years. I hope to bridge the gap between what we talk about in Raleigh with what happens in our schools with our children, and to represent the amazing teachers like my group here of teachers that work very hard to put into the schools of North Carolina.
We're delighted to have all three of you, and we're so pleased that before we even formally introduced you, you jumped right in yesterday and started giving us advice and counsel, and we welcome it. Even if we don't act like we want to hear it, we do want to hear it. So please come forward, colleagues, and let's take a photo.
Right in the middle, Mariah.
It's good to be good at something. Can't be on the outside, young man. James is right.
I think it's time. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, bro. We now come to our special recognitions section of our meeting, a time when we recognize significant awards, achievements, and particularly those who make a difference in the lives of our public school students each day. And today we'll recognize 2 North Carolina students who have received a national and state Prudential Spirit Award. For 24 years, young volunteers across the United States have been honored, and these North Carolina public school students are among those who have identified a problem that needs a solution, took the initiative to create a solution, and they're here to share it with us today. So at this time, I'd like to call on the national honoree from one of our charter schools, that being Metrolina Regional Scholars, Mr. Alexander Fultz, to present some brief remarks on his experience. Mr. Fultz.
Just right here.
Yes, perfect.
Cool beans. Good morning to you all. My name is Alexander Fultz. I'm 14 years old, and I'm getting ready to start my freshman year at South Meck High School in Charlotte. I have a charity called Alexander's Toy Trunk that began in 2010 when I was 5 years old. My own brother was in the hospital with PFAPA. I can't pronounce the name. No one else can, so I won't go through that right now. It's an inflammatory disorder, and so he had 107-degree fevers every 4 weeks, and he was in the hospital for week-long stays. So I was there. I was a frequent there, and thusly I became familiar with all the staff there. We got to know each other. They brought me batteries from my Leapster, stuff like that, small stuff like that. And so, being 5, the thought occurred to me, what about Christmas? I was 5. And so I asked my parents, hey mom, hey dad, did the kids get to go home for Christmas? And they're like, not most of them, no. And I was like, that's not good in my book, because Christmas was my favorite holiday because you got stuff. And I was concerned that the kids in the hospital wouldn't get stuff. So I decided to use my allowance, my birthday money, and some money I found in between the couch cushions to buy 8 toys and bring them to the events coordinator, Miss Carrie Cuton, at Levine Children's Hospital, Christmas Eve 2010. She told me something. I don't have that great a memory, so I forgot what she said. But whatever she said, it inspired me to continue to go forward, and I wanted to expand it. So the next year, 2011, I included a lemonade stand, raised some more money, bought some more toys. And so that continued to keep on going until 2015. And in 2015, Miss Carrie asked me, hey, can you take over the NICU? Like, can you handle the donations for the neonatal intensive care unit? I had not heard of it then, and she explained it to me. They are the premature babies in the hospital. And I said, why not? So that year, 10 to 15 bags of stuff for 10 to 15 babies. And so that kept on growing. And this year I was able to provide over 150 bags to 3 hospitals in the greater Charlotte region. And overall, I've raised about $125,000 for I've raised $125,000 for over a dozen hospitals in over 4 states. So this year was crazy, obviously. Many hours were devoted to making bags. 12 people came over to our house. We spent 4 hours making all the bags, and that was just filling them. But I'm not here to talk about that. I've also impacted many of the children in my community. Some of the kids that I have inspired have made charities of their own. Others have been inspired to do toy drives at their own schools after seeing me do one of mine. And yeah, so a 3-year-old boy asked if he could help pick out some Matchbox cars one day. So I was like, why not? So we went to Target and we cleared out the whole stock. In my bags of stuff for the babies, I have an outfit, a blanket, a hand crocheted hat, multiple books, a sound machine with batteries, and a blanket. And that is given to all of the families in all of the hospitals Christmas Day. I'm also expanding to do donations year round, which is pretty cool. Hold on, I gotta read my notes. So all I really have to say now is thanks, Prudential, and thanks to all of you for listening to my speech and bringing me here to recognize me. It's really an honor to meet all you guys, talk in front of the people that make it happen. So thank you very much.
Well, Alexander, we owe you a great deal of thanks. One, for sharing that story, and two, for demonstrating the selfless service and caring for others, sacrificing for others that inspire all the rest of us. So in a moment, we'll ask you to come forward and take a picture with us. But at this point, I'd also like to recognize the state honoree who happens to come from actually a rival school of South Mecklenburg, Audrey Kell, Miss Simone Adhikara, and ask her to come forward and provide some brief remarks on her experience on this award. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Simone Adhikari. I'm 17 years old and a rising senior at Audrey Kell High School in Charlotte, North Carolina. And today I'm going to talk to you about a project that I started in Nepal. And just as a refresher, Nepal is right below China on the map. So the name of my project is called Smart Keti, and in Nepali, Keti actually means girl, so the project is Smart Girl, and it works to empower young girls in village schools. And so this is the location where the project takes place, and this is just one of the beautiful sights you can see. So this is the Tamakoshi River. Most of the village is situated around this river. The population is about 3,000 people, and most people are farmers. And in rural Nepal, gender inequality is a big problem. More money, more time, and more effort is placed on a boy's education, which leaves girls to drop out of school early and marry young. So I knew that I wanted to do something to help these girls. So in 2014, I went to Nepal, and I knew I had to find something to occupy my time with. And at that time, I was very interested in bracelet making, and I would always look on Pinterest to find new crafts. And so I came up with an idea to teach these girls in Nepal how to make bracelets. And so I don't know if you know, but there are no Michael's craft stores in Nepal. So I made pre-made packages with all the material. In Nepal, I held a one-day training session with 24 young girls. Most of them were 18 to 24 years of age, and they came from neighboring villages as well. A lot of them were all eager and excited to make these bracelets. A lot of them had never made bracelets before. And we were very strict about the quality of the bracelet. And we paid them $2 for each bracelet they made and sold them back in the US and the UK. We set up a store in Nepal where they could buy materials to make the bracelets. All our materials are found in Nepal locally. The beads can be found in a marketplace. The fishing wire is actually used by the local indigenous Maji fisherman group, and the buttons and the string are all from Nepal. And so at this point, I returned back to the US. In the US, here are some pictures that the Smart Girls sent to me. The first one shows a girl buying more materials to make more bracelets, and the second shows another girl making a bracelet while she's cooking dinner in her kitchen. So these are what the bracelets look like. They wrap around the wrist 4 to 5 times, and they have an adjustable wrist string so you can change the size. Initially, we started off with 4 designs and colors shown above. The wrist, it can change from smaller size wrist to a larger size wrist. So back in the US, I initially sold to family and friends, but I met with the distributor who was able to set up a stand at 26 different craft fairs all around the US. As the project gained momentum, we got some fans. Here are 3 people who ran a half marathon in Smart KT's name and raised money for this project because they really were inspired by the message to empower girls to stay in school. So the stats. There are 24 Smart KTs. We've sold about 800 bracelets and are continuing to sell more. Each girl earns about $2 per bracelet, which they use for extra school fees or tutoring or to contribute to their household income. And then we sell them in the US for $12. They're sold in the US and the UK, and we have raised about $9,000, but are continuing. And all of the proceeds go back to this village. I've donated I built a school library, donated solar lamps to a neighboring village, and also I bought a loom to fund a second income generating project. So in May, I received the Prudential Spirit of Community Awards. I was a North Carolina State honoree for high school level. It was a great experience, and I spent 5 days in Washington, D.C. getting recognized and meeting other state volunteers. Here is, the keynote speaker was Viola Davis. So at the conference, a lot of the other honorees and their families loved the message to keep girls in school, so they bought bracelets. And I sold about 100 bracelets here.
That's great.
This was a great experience for me, and I met state honorees from all over. Here are the state honorees from Colorado, North Dakota, New Jersey, and even Alaska. Also, this is me with Senator Tom Tillis. When I got back to Charlotte, the publicity of the award allowed me to spread this message even further. I sold bracelets at my school and to my friends, and I was even invited to be on local television. I communicate with these girls frequently, and here are the latest pictures they've sent me about them making these bracelets. Now we have branched out, and they are able to create their own design of bracelets. About a month ago, I received another shipment of bracelets, and these are different from the initial ones because these girls are being more creative and innovative and designing their own style of bracelets. So from this project, I've learned 3 main important things. First of all, instead of just giving the money to these girls, I was able to teach them a skill so they could earn income, and that helped the project be more sustainable. Number 2, seed money can really go a long way. $2 is a lot of money in Nepal. And number 3, I was able to inspire a lot of young girls. Since this 5-year project, I've been back 3 times, and some younger girls have come up to me in the marketplace and have asked to be a part of the project. And I've seen girls become class leaders and turn away from their shy personalities and become confident leaders. So more information can be found at smartkt.com. You can find more pictures and videos and even meet some of the Smart KTs. And thank you so much for recognizing me here. It's a real honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Smart. Do you have any bracelets with you for sale? Oh, well, there you go.
I have 2 daughters. I need 2.
Yeah, I'm second
Oh,
that.
and a wife. 3.
Could you both come forward? We'd love to get a picture with you. And board members?
Thank you. Yeah, my mom's here.
Would the proud parents or family members or other, please stand. Thank you for sending us your best. Next on our agenda, I'll call on Dr. Cynthia Martin to provide a brief presentation on the 2019 Principal and Teacher of the Year and Regional Principals and Teachers of the Year. Dr. Martin?
Good morning, Superintendent Johnson, Chairman Davis, State Board members, and advisors. As stated, I am Cynthia Martin, Recognition and Advancement Lead for the department. Of all my many duties here at DPI, continuing the tradition of recognizing outstanding teachers and principals is my highest honor. This is a mighty partnership. Since 1970 and 1984 respectively, the department, which includes DPI leadership, district and regional support, the Office of Charter Schools and Communication and Graphics, along with the State Board of Education and our flagship corporate sponsors, the Borough's Welcome Fund and the Wells Fargo Foundation, have facilitated the North Carolina Teacher and Principal of the Year programs, recognizing outstanding educators. I have had a chance to witness a shift in both programs, from the emphasis on an isolated impact of an individual to a more collective impact as a cohort affecting important educational issues in our state. An example of that is the 2019 Borough's Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year cohort agreeing to jump on Friday with the Golden Knights to highlight important educational issues in our state. And yes, Freebird will be joining them.
They're born, all right.
Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the 2019 Teacher of the Year cohort. First, let me recognize Ms. Laura Brooks, our Northwest Regional Teacher of the Year from Wilkes County High School in Wilkes County. She could not be with us today, but I wanted you to know she represents and has been representing the Northwest region well. First, we do have with us Mr. Damon Walcott. He is the Northeast Regional Teacher of the Year from Washington High in Beaufort County. Next, we have Ms. Christy Howe. She is the Southeast Regional Teacher of the Year from Bradley Creek Elementary in New Hanover County. Next, we have Ms. Katie Eddings. She's the North Central Region Teacher of the Year from Lee County High in Lee County. Next, we have Ms. Sheila Patterson. She is the Piedmont Triad Regional Teacher of the Year from South Stokes High in Stokes County. Next, we have Ms. Kate Colberth, the Southwest Regional Teacher of the Year from Wolf Meadow Elementary in Cabarrus County. Next, we have Mr. Caesar Capana IV. He is the Western Region Teacher of the Year from Hayesville High in Clay County. Next, we have Mr. Douglas Price. He's the Charter Schools Teacher of the Year from Voyager Academy Middle in Durham, North Carolina. Last but not least, I give to you our 50th North Carolina Teacher of the Year, Ms. Mariah Morris. represents West Pine Elementary in Moore County. Together, they make up the 2019 Burroughs Welcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year cohort. Please give them a round of applause.
Board members, could you join us?
Thank you for your voice.
That's awesome. Back to my email right quick. Send that to me. Brenda, give you some books. Those are good.
Not to be outdone, I do have our POY cohort present today. I would like to acknowledge Mr. Sean Gilliard, the Piedmont Triad Regional Principal of the Year representing Lexington City Schools, and Dr. Tamisha Barnes-Jones, the Southwest Regional Principal of the Year representing Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. They were not able to join us today. But we do have with us Miss Melissa Fields, who is our Northeast Regional Principal of the Year from Perquimans Central in Perquimans County. Next, we have Miss Elizabeth Pierce, who is the Southeast Regional Principal of the Year from E.B. Fink Middle in Lenoir County. Next, we have Mr. Bo Mullins, Sand Hills Regional Principal of the Year from Clement Elementary in Sampson County. Next, we have Michelle Baker, who is the Northwest Regional Principal of the Year from Eastfield Global Magnet in McDowell County. Next, we have Dr. Brandon Sutton, who is the Western Regional Principal of the Year, representing Swain County Middle in Swain County. Last but not least, I feel like you all really were introduced to him yesterday. I give you our 40th North Carolina Principal of the Year, Mr. Matthew Bristow Smith. He represents Edgecombe Early College High in Edgecombe County. Together, they make up the 2019 Wells Fargo, North Carolina Principal of the Year cohort.
No airplanes.
I'm
No
disappointed.
airplanes.
Very disappointed.
But intergalactic space flight is right around the corner.
proud of you. Thank you very much.
This concludes my presentation. Thank you to the department and the State Board of Education for all your support.
Thank you, sir. Sir. Well, obviously, our schools and our classrooms are in good hands with that group of teachers and principals, and we're proud of you. I'll now call on Ms. Cecilia Holden for a brief legislative update. Ms. Holden, welcome.
I'll begin by sporting my new bracelet. Lots of transactions have occurred since the presentation back here. I think she's probably cashed in $1 million already. So I encourage you to do the same. I'm wearing it because my daughter will steal it the minute she sees it. I am going to do my best to give you a briefing as to where we are in the session and some update on bills that have become law and also those that are still moving that are pretty high profile for the state board. In your materials that are posted online, there's a lot of information. I will not begin to cover it, so you don't have to panic over that today. The first thing that's in those meeting materials, it tells you kind of an overview. How many bills were filed? How many have moved forward? How many are K-12? How many have become law so far? To kind of sum it up for you, if you look at that, we had 362 K-12 bills, and of those, 31 have become session law so far. That kind of puts it into perspective. The session is still moving rapidly, so I anticipate several others will make it to session law, but that's where we are in terms of K-12 bills. In your materials, you'll see those that have become session law, and it gives you a brief overview of those so that you can kind of get a synopsis as to what those are. I will tell you that the Ann Murtha and the superintendent's legislative intern, Carson Nelson, are working diligently to try to put together a briefing on each one that will tell the impact to the state board and the agency in terms of action items required. And then also the new reports that we have and report dates that have changed and things of that nature. So our hope is that we will have that pretty much ready to go once the session adjourns. In your materials, you also see a list of bills that have been assigned to conference committees or that have been approved by one chamber but not the other, but not yet approved or rejected in order to be assigned to conference either. And then you also have a list of high-profile bills that are still moving forward, as well as a list of those items that were on the state board's legislative agenda that are now session law. I think we've had several wins so far, and I anticipate we will have several more before the end of the session. So where are we in the session? I will point out that we still do not have a budget. We don't have a path forward on that yet, or at least it's not been revealed if there is one. I don't know that there is. So where we are in terms of our budget, the General Assembly did have a continuing resolution. We continue operating on the previous biennium budget. In addition to that, they have passed a bill that speaks to federal funds that were needed and language around those so that we can continue operating as we were previous to the session. In regards to bills that have become session law that are high profile, Tom Tomberlin touched on a couple of those yesterday. One is Senate Bill 219, which has a lot around teacher licensure. The other is House Bill 107, which touches on a lot around the educator preparation and the state board's evaluation and dashboard for that. So you will probably see, as Tom mentioned, some additional changes to Senate Bill 219 that may come out as part of another bill that's moving forward. Another bill that I'll bring, or two bills that I'll bring your attention to in your materials are appointment bills. You've got House Bill 263 and Senate Bill 686. So what we've done is put together a list of appointments that have been made what boards they were made to, and then also parsed it out so that you would be able to see who in your region is assigned to what board. And it would be great, I'm sure, if you know these people, to reach out, or it's also a good resource for the state board to tap into, knowing that we've got people spread throughout the state on these different boards and commissions. One of the items that the state board had requested, and we did receive this session, it's now session law, is staggered terms for the Professional Educator Preparation Standards Commission, also known as PEPSI. We did receive the staggered terms. Those appointments were spelled out in one of the appointment bills. So that is out there, and those members are assigned. The purpose of that was to ensure that we don't have all the talent rotating off of the commission at the same time. Another one of the bills that is session law is House Bill 362. This was a big ask of the state board, and that is that it codifies the 15-point grading scale. So that is now codified in law. The next is an extension for the state board rulemaking. So we did get some extension, which our general counsel has been working diligently, he and Deanna, on a lot of the policies and the rules around that, as well as the rest of the state board office. And of course, without the help of DPI, this would not be possible to be able to figure out what needs to become a rule. An item that I will point out that does require action of the state board, I would encourage you to work with us to try to figure out how best to go about this. One of our items, because there's been so much conversation around the school report card, is what should the school report card be made up of? What should the weightings be? What should be on the report card? And so we were directed through House Bill 362 to study and make recommendations back to the General Assembly on reporting methods used for school accountability purposes on the North Carolina annual school report cards. The big point here is that this report is due back February 15th, 2020. So the work needs to begin. I have a list from NASB that spells out what other states are doing. I think that there's some baseline and some good work that's already been done in other states, but I would encourage us to figure out how we can make sure that we're working on this between now and February so we have a solid plan to take back to the General Assembly. House Bill 922 is a bill that it's enhanced insurance coverage for education buildings. This has an impact directly on our agency. What it does is it transfers the DPI insurance fund section of DPI over to the Department of Insurance, and it further requires all local boards of education, regional schools, and community colleges that are in flood zones to have flood insurance. House Bill 924, teacher contract changes. This one is one that just clarifies language around the amount of time that a teacher has to work before they can actually become eligible for an employment contract. But specifically, one of the items that I had reported on in a prior state board meeting is around the language that was in our budget that has not yet become law, but it was the requirement for the economics and personal finance as a graduation requirement. So that is now session law. The funding that is attached to that is tied up in the budget, but the requirement is in fact now session law, and this would begin with the 9th grade group that enters into high school 2020, 2021. House Bill 301 is a regional school modification, and this is creates a withdrawal process. We have a regional school, whereas you've got 3 high schools that agreed to come together and become a regional school. And should that be a scenario in other areas of the state as well, this would apply there. What this does is this creates a way for one of the high schools to withdraw from the regional model. So what it spells out is, first, what would have to happen is an adoption of the withdrawal resolution by the participating unit. So if a high school wants to pull out, they would have to adopt a withdrawal resolution. Next, the Regional School Board of Directors would have to approve that resolution by a 2/3 vote. Then the Regional Board of Directors would submit a resolution to the state board. And then finally, the state board would be required It says after 10 days of receipt of the resolution at the next state board meeting would then be able to vote as to whether or not they would allow that withdrawal to occur. And the state board would need to provide an opportunity for public comment. And public comment could be done in a number of different ways, not necessarily at the meeting itself, but just to make sure that there was an opportunity for public comment on that. And then finally, the state board would be able to either grant or deny the final approval of the withdrawal resolution. So those are the high-profile bills that I thought would be able to be covered quickly in a legislative update. Now I'll touch on a few other high-profile bills that are either in conference or that have not yet passed both chambers, but I believe that these are still of high interest to the state board. And even while I was sitting waiting to give my update, I got an update that one of these is moved, so I'll give you that as well. Speaking of the Senate Bill 438, which is the Read to Achieve bill, Excellent Public Schools Act. The Senate approved the conference report, and as of this morning, the House did as well, so this will be going for the governor for signature. As a reminder, when a bill goes to conference, what can happen is if you have the Senate maybe passes it and the House does not concur, then they can assign a bill to a conference committee. Then both chambers will assign members to work on a compromise solution for that bill. Once they come out and they have a conference report, then that conference report can be adopted by both chambers or rejected or whatever happens, but it's an up or down vote. So there aren't amendments on the floor. So once the conference report comes out, the House and the Senate would then have to both bless it, and then it would go to the governor for signature, or if they reject it, then it would not move forward at that point. Senate Bill 476 is another one, and that is a competency-based assessment and the mental health teen violence bill. This one passed the House. The Senate did not concur at this point. It has not been assigned to conference. This gets back to the work of the state board in 2017 around the mental health policy, and then what went forward, and the superintendent convened a work group, and that work group came forward with some language. There's conversations around this. I don't know if it will move forward or not. At this point, there are pieces of what came out of that work group in 476, but as I mentioned, it has not yet passed the Senate. In addition to that, it would direct the state board, this same bill would direct the state board to recommend how to transition to a competency-based assessment and teaching model. So it's two totally different things but are combined into one bill. Also, Senate Bill 621. So the House and the Senate have had different versions of what they thought would make up a Test Reduction Act of 2019. And the Senate had their version, the House came out with theirs, and they've played a little ping pong back and forth. So at this point, a conference committee has been assigned, and they're currently working towards a resolution as to what type of language will end up in a final bill as it pertains to test reduction. Senate Bill 522 is the low performing schools bill. This was done with a lot of work with J.B. Buxton and Amy White, and they convened work groups around it as it pertains to low performing schools. Specifically, the ISD is a piece of the language that has been reviewed and that the state board weighed in on, provided a lot of modifications for the ISD legislation. So at this point, the bill has passed the House, and as of yesterday, the bill was sent to the Education Committee for their consideration, and I don't believe that it's as much controversial at the Senate, but more they wanted an opportunity. It's extensive legislation to be reviewed, so they wanted an opportunity to review it in more detail. My hope is that that will move forward and we will see a lot of the work that came out of the state board work group on this. Finally, Senate Bill 687 is a State Board of Education confirmation joint session. I sent you all an email yesterday to let you know that this bill has moved once again. The bill has been passed by the Senate. It's now over in the House. It's my understanding that both of the chambers are working to try to identify dates that may work for a joint session in hopes of being able to see the governor's appointments or recommendations confirmed in the General Assembly. So in order to be able to confirm the state board appointments, what has to occur is a joint session. And then at that point, the House and the Senate in a joint session would vote to confirm or not the governor appointments that have been recommended. At this point, I'll hit pause. It's a whole lot of information. If there are any specific bills that are on the list that are of particular interest to you, I always welcome anybody reaching out separately from the board meetings just to get more behind the scenes what might be going on with the bill. But I'll open it up to questions at this time if that's all right, Chair Davis.
Sure. Questions for Ms. Holden? Thank you, thoroughly informed us.
Thank you. I appreciate, it's been a pleasure to be able to call on a lot of you and almost all of you throughout the session. And I think that the General Assembly's enjoyed hearing from you. I know that Matt jumped right on cooperative innovatives, and, you know, it often helps whenever you're out in the field or you're hearing directly from teachers, students, principals, leaders in the schools to be able to carry that message. So I really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And a special thank you to DPI and all the staff there for helping us as well.
Well, thank you for your fine work, Ms. Holden. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, and I'll call on our superintendent for the superintendent's report to the board.
Thank you. A lot of exciting things coming up as we start back to school. We have launch of Teach NC coming up. We have launch of the school safety app coming up. And that all requires really hard work by the people in this department. Again, we'll go back to something I started a few months ago, just highlighting a few people that have gone above and beyond, but know that there's just an extraordinary amount of hard work going on in this department, and we are so grateful for the people who work here and are getting that work done. First, I do want to give the official introduction, I don't know if we have, to Dr. David Stigall, Deputy Superintendent of Innovation. Like I said yesterday, has already hit the ground running, and we have so much going on in innovation, from some of the things that we started a few months ago, like the innovative assessment pilot, all the way to figuring out what the next steps are going to be with ISD and tying in district regional support. A lot of work going on there. Thank you. And Dr. Beverly Emery is not here with us today. She's finalizing some last things that she had as a superintendent of Winston-Salem Forsyth County, but putting together this team. And really the handoff that was from Dr. James Ellerby when he was here to get the district regional support team together, taking that, they are building out that function for DPI, and it's going to be a great program that we have. We'll give a shout out to Dr. James Ellerby. Glad we could convince him to come back to North Carolina, but he has already hit the ground running, and one thing Dr. Stigall and I have talked about is he's not just going to be focused just on ISD. We're going to use his talents across this department anywhere we can. So really happy to have him. Bo Trumbo is now the new director for Center for Safer Schools. And if you have not met him yet, you really need to meet Bo. One thing that we've really wanted to do with the Center for Safer Schools is make it the true clearinghouse for North Carolina and school safety. He comes to us from a previous career working at the Secret Service focused on school safety. So he brings that experience, and he will be reaching out across the state, connecting with not just lawmakers, but also local district level leaders in safety, and we will be building out that network. Some shout outs, Dr. Cynthia Martin, who you heard from earlier, really going above and beyond and taking the Teacher of the Year and Principal Year to the next level. Very excited. They know from when, that bittersweet moment when I have to announce the winner. I hate having to say that there's only one person that can do this, and now there is not. It is truly coming. It's building into a program, thanks to Freebird and his help too. It is building into a program where Teachers of the Year and Principals of the Year can truly be leaders of their regions and have influence on what goes on here in Raleigh. From the regional support, Jessica Swinsky from District and Regional Support. She is the Sandhills coordinator, and there's been a lot of work going on in Robeson County. Robeson County definitely needs our help, and we are happy to be there, but it's been a very heavy load, and she has really been someone who has coordinated the DPI team with Robeson County, really showing the potential of what District and Regional Support has already hitting the ground running. And Dr. Trey Michael, really appreciate our visions are right in line with where we're going with CTE. really taking it to the 21st century, making it about career pathway conversations for students, starting in middle school. I have had the honor and privilege of being able to speak at association meetings where students come, whether it's Skills USA or Future Farmers of America. I mean, just great events where students come and we can encourage them that they are really working on their pathway to success. But in particular, the Perkins Grant reauthorization. And that is actually the nuts and bolts of where we're going to put out our plan for where CTE goes in the future. We heard about it yesterday. Thank you to the C&I group. A lot of work going on in standards. Thank you to accountability. A lot of work going on with revising our accountability metrics and thinking of new innovative ways that we can actually reduce testing. Huge point of privilege to honor Dr. Tara Galloway. She has had an extremely busy summer, has been leading this Read to Achieve diagnostic tool work like a true champion, and is actually not with us today because she's at one of the trainings for the new tool. But she has absolutely been a champion of that, and the amount of work she's put into that is phenomenal and will pay off when the new tool rolls out later this year. And then I do have to do a special shout out because we have been working on this protest response around the new reading diagnostic tool. That is now, all the information is now public. It is all out there. We'll make sure that it's posted on the website so anybody can have access to the letter that went out telling the full story. But I do have to give a lot of credit to the team that helped really solidify everything that went on in that procurement process and put it in a form that anyone can go and read for themselves. My Chief Strategy Officer, Chloe Gossage, Catherine Johnson, the Deputy Superintendent of Operations, and an outstanding shout out to the legal team here at at DPI. Philip, McKinsey, and Daniel worked countless hours, very late nights, but we have a very strong document that tells the people in North Carolina what occurred in that process, the problems we had with it, and how we eventually had a fair and objective process that ended up with a great tool. So we're excited about that, and I could not have done it without them. So thank you very much, and stay tuned. A lot of exciting things are going to be launching in the next few weeks for back to school.
Thank you, Superintendent Johnson. And I'll add that we look forward in our September 2019 meeting to having our student advisors join us, Senior Meredith Gaskell from Rowan Salisbury Schools and Junior Nate Colt Tomberlin from Durham Public Schools. We'll now move to our committee reports, and I'll remind committee chairs in the audience that all voting on consent and any action items will be done at the end of the agenda by roll call. We'll start with our Strategic Planning Committee, and I'll call on that committee's chair, Mr. James Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really and extremely excited to be able to have reached this point of our discussion around the strategic plan. I should begin by saying I'm James Ford. I'm joined alongside my Vice Chair, Ms. Jill Kamitz, as well as several other participants in the committee. I want to begin by thanking everybody on the state board, and as well as the DPI staff, thanking everybody in stakeholder groups, teachers, school leaders, general public, who has weighed in at any point in this process. It has made for a learning journey, and I think a product that is all the more stronger and something that really aligns with our core values. You may recall in our very last meeting that we permitted and allowed for everybody to take a glance at our most recent iteration of this strategic plan. And you know the primary goals that are associated with this plan. We wanted to give everybody time throughout the month to pour over and comb through each of the details and to think about whether the definitions fit, whether the goals and the objectives aligned to what we want to do as this the current strategic plan sunsets and we enter a new 5-year phase. I want to make sure that as we reach this point that we make sure we resolve all concerns. I know there were some folks have reached out wanting clarification on the notions of equity and equity definitions, so I will take, before I allow Dr. Townsend Green to begin, just to provide a little bit of clarity around that, particularly around like notions of fairness not always being equal, And I'll borrow a phrase from one of my mentors and longtime CMS board member and chair, Arthur Griffin, when he says that the reason why we talk about fairness not being equal or equity not being equality is that when you treat unequally situated people equally, what you get in the end are unequals. And so what happens is, as we approach education as a system, it requires a recognition that gifts and talents are distributed fairly equally, but opportunity is not. And so part of our way of course correcting is implementing interventions that take into account that differential distribution of opportunity and builds a system that recognizes that, so that what we're really equalizing is the opportunity. But in order to do that, you can't do the same thing. Any of us who have children, more than one, you know that God bless them, we love them, but they are not the same, right? They can look alike when they come from the same, lineage, but they're really, really different. And in order to help one to succeed, some things you do for one, it may not resonate for whatever reason with the other one, but God knows that we love them all the same and that we're willing to do and treat them fairly and justly. And so that same mindset is what we take in, and we think that that captures the spirit of what we mean when we say equity. And also, just, that same spirit it animates the notions of restorative justice. The nation has begun to kind of move towards that when talking about discipline and understanding that, there may be moments where exclusionary discipline is necessary, but what we're really hoping to do is allow young people to understand the nature of their violation to the community and restore themselves back to community. Because really it's about helping to understand what has happened and reconciling that and using all the requisite tools, the circles, right? The huddle ups, the interventions and mediations that accompany that, but trying to chart a new course as it concerns our discipline and understanding how do we really get young folk to realize the violation that occurred, but also giving them the grace to understand that they can be renewed and they can be restored back to those communities. So before I hand it off, I hope that alleviates any concerns and helps provide clarity around those definitions. I want to thank the new advisors who've been jumping right in on these conversations and offering really, really good feedback. And once again, just to everybody else, as we've reached this point of decision, I have a debt of gratitude for everybody for the level of engagement. It's really been a pleasure. And so, Dr. Thomas-Smith.
Good morning, Chair Davis, Vice Chair Duncan, Superintendent Johnson, and respective members of the board. I stand before you today, I guess humbled because you allowed me to challenge you last October to move forward with changes to your strategic plan. And to underscore what Mr. Ford has stated today, just want to say thank you overall for engaging in this work, providing the feedback, being willing to put it out there for stakeholder feedback and getting a lot of good input from the field. We started this journey last October, and we discovered after you allowed me to analyze your plan that we had a lot of goals and a lot of objectives, and we truly weren't focused on, we had too many priorities to truly focus on. And so over the course of this year, we worked to focus on 3 clear goals that are outlined in our strategic plan, all centered around equity and whole child. You're going to hear momentarily a presentation from your whole child committee who will offer some recommendations to you. And as a participant in that working group a few weeks ago, I can clearly say that even some of the things that they are recommending to you to put forward are truly aligned with things that we've already outlined in the plan. So I'm not going to stand up here long today because you know what the 3 goals are. They are eliminating opportunity gaps, improving school and district performance, and increasing educator preparedness by 2025. I do want to underscore that goal 3, which is increasing educator preparedness, was the goal that received the most glory marks, and I think it points to a comment that Ms. Morris made yesterday that we have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I misquote you, that we have to start with the educator first. And so I think we have that strong focus within the strategic plan, and overall, I think that we're ready to go. So from my perspective, next steps in this process include continuing to engage partners to help move this work forward across the state. making the final documents more aesthetically pleasing, so that we can get those posted for consumption, making final tweaks to this plan, including making tweaks to the vision statement. I got a few more points of clarification and feedback last night. I think that those tweaks don't change the substance of what we put forward as our vision, and so we will make those changes. And then I would like to begin the use of this strategic plan component at your next meeting so that we can begin to start tracking and then setting up some processes to progress monitor along the way. And overall, I just want to say that while this work was hard, now the real work begins. And this is where the hard work truly begins. So should you approve this plan, your approval today does not mean that we can't change something that we see. This just means that this establishes this plan as your true priorities as we move forward. But we will have the opportunity to course correct along the way. So I just want to extend thanks for your time and attention that you place with this strategic plan. I want to open it up for any comments from the advisors who are sitting at the table to underscore any other remarks. But thank you so much for your time today. Questions?
I say, Vice Chair Cammons, do you have anything that you would like to?
I could not add to what you just said.
I would just like to echo absolutely what you said earlier about, and what you said too, Matt, about the focus on eliminating opportunity gaps. But I want to echo what you said, Ms. Morris, about the need to really begin with the educator. And I really feel like 3.4 and increasing opportunities for educator engagement inside and outside of schools, and really working on providing our teachers the opportunities to learn about the culturally relevant and equity-focused resources that are out there, but really making those available and giving them immersive opportunities to engage in that. And we had some great conversations about this last night over dinner, about the steps that we can take as a board, but also as a state to really provide more opportunities for our educators in this process. So I'm really excited about this whole entire process, and I agree. The next few months are really where the work begins, and I'm excited about the board retreat, and we've already been talking about some ways that we can really begin to put this into an impactful way for all of us. So thank you for your hard work on this.
I just want to comment, 23 years in education, I've seen a lot of district school improvement plans and a lot of school level school improvement plans. This is the first time in my new role that I've really paid attention to a state plan. I probably should have done that prior to getting where I am. But I will say that there is a clarity and a salience to the three major goals that will make alignment with district or LEA plans and school plans so much easier. I think all three of the goals speak to major initiatives that every LEA in our state care about and are working towards also. So kudos to the state board for not having a strategic plan with 25 major goals, but with three major buckets that we're going to work on over the next 5 years. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson-Smith. JB.
Question, James, and thanks a lot to you and to Camnitz for the work on this. And I think of strategic plans kind of like a logic model. If these three things, these three major goals happen, then we can predict them. And the way I read it is what these three things aggregate to is a sound basic education for every child in the state. And so to that end, if that's right, and this can be rhetorical now, or we can come back to it at some point, but I'm trying to think of what would be the measure or two or three measures of our ultimate goal that we would look at if we thought about almost a scorecard. We've got a lot of metrics that ought to lead to that ultimate goal. So what is that ultimate goal that would say we are achieving our mission and vision?
Yeah.
Trying to get
I think that's a really good question, and I think it'd be hard for me to answer that just because one or two goals would be almost insufficient, right? what I do think is probably good for us to entertain is building out a dashboard. And I know we've had conversations about that, because some of the metrics for each of these objectives we talked about. We talked about where to find, what are the sources of this information. In some cases, it might be cross-sector, but it'd be very hard to distill that, GPA or end of course grade would be the true metric, because we're talking about whole child, right, in some of these aspects, and mental health, and that won't cover that. So it's perhaps worthwhile, as we continue to work through this, to think about what would a dashboard look like, because I agree, right? The if-then statements are needed, and we're going to have to figure out, which I think the state's been trying to figure out for a long time, what exactly does a sound basic education look like? All right.
Helpful. And just one follow-up, if I could, and I'm excited about this, and always the proof is in how you actually use it. And so I'm just interested in any opening thoughts about how we build this into our budget process, how we build it into our monitoring progress. I mean, generally, we'd look at the assets we have in the department to drive against these and their effectiveness in the field, and getting some survey data about feedback loops, about how the field sees the department's ability to build their capacity to do this work if we're in fact aligned. So I'm just interested in any thoughts, no other comments about the plan itself.
I think I may have mentioned the metaphor that resonates for me as a teacher is using this in the same way that we use the North Carolina Standard Course of Study. That is to say that all of our actions need to be congruent with the plan, and not the assumption of congruency, but documented, right? Whereby when we make an activity, or when we exercise any sort of action, we need to not only ask ourselves, does it align, but which of these goals and objectives does it align with? And I think demarcating that would be important to kind of chart our activity. And couldn't agree more with the building and the feedback loops, and constantly revisiting this and hearing back from stakeholders to make sure that, we're holding ourselves to accountability and fidelity to what we've prescribed as our path forward. But that would be I'm much like yourself. I'm just not interested in us putting a very shiny document out there that we can all feel good about, and then not using it in any way that's tangible. I don't think that does young people any good. Nor does it help us.
To that point, any budget or funding ask that we suggest to the department and our friends in the General Assembly should be directly aligned to our strategic plan. And if it is not, then we shouldn't be asking for it.
Couldn't agree more.
I'd too like to chime in and say thank you for all the hard work that y'all have done on this. And as we always said, there's work to be done, and let's get with it. And I think we have the right board to do that. And as I always say, it's about caring for our kids, and we all do that. We love our kids. So let's do what we need to do and go get it.
On a more nuts and bolts level, I think that our new regional support structure, in terms of having a cadre of folks outside of the board to go out and spread the word and help with some of the education that's going to have to go on amongst our leaders in our schools and our teachers in our schools. And so I think that we have a great opportunity to use that in this work.
One more, do you mind?
Sure.
Just in kind of answering what Mr. Buxton was saying, I do believe that, particularly in Goal 1, there are steps that we can look at, the dropout percentages and increased percentages, and we can absolutely measure those from year to year, district by district. So I love what Goal 1 does, and if we're really going to close those opportunity gaps, I mean, from year to year, we look at, what are we doing that's actually reducing or increasing those percentages that we're seeking out in those areas. So I think there's some real chance to show that ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve here. So.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about something like, if I were going to think of one measure that said whether we did our job to prepare a kid at a Leandro standard, that 97 definition that essentially is ready for college career, it might be they graduate eligible to move into credit-bearing coursework. I mean, that would tell me that student has options, whether it's career, college, military, because they're gonna hit all the benchmarks to move. I don't, that would year over year give us, if we are increasing those numbers, then our logic, something's right about our logic model. That's all I'm thinking about, something like that. But a quick follow-up, because the department is so important in this work and its ability to work to build the capacity of districts and schools around the state and provide sports, I'm thinking of regional support. Do we have any, and I guess, Ms. Superintendent, this is probably for you, have we done any customer service kind of survey? Do we have any baseline about how districts see services we are providing in different areas of the department to the field?
Yes, and I think that's better answered by Dr. Emery. I'm sorry she can't be here today, but I think we can have her speak to that, because that's an important part of acknowledging where we are, where we were as a department too, and using that feedback to build where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be great if we had some data on how districts saw our support across the department. That allowed us to understand where we need to support the superintendent's ability to build that capacity to be of greatest support to districts and schools. I'm thinking regional support, but I'm thinking everything, and how the field sees our capacity and efficacy. That would be important data to have that would help inform.
Just to clarify, specifically in relation to the department, though, yeah? Right. So making sure we don't mix it up with their opinions of their LEA or whatever, right, but specifically.
No. It's services we're providing.
Got you.
In EC and turnaround and finance, across just good customer service data.
But then we align the results of that with the strategic plan.
Right.
Becomes a metric, right? Any other thoughts or commentary on the strategic plan?
Sorry.
I guess that's the signal.
That's it, it's done.
Battery's running low.
Up.
Hearing none.
That was the
Mr.
gong.
Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Ford, just a couple of comments to add, I agree with my colleagues' comments, so this is in support of theirs. This might be called the State Board of Education Strategic Plan, but it's really the North Carolina Public School System Strategic Plan. We just happen to be the group that gets to vote on it and see it through. And I so value the input we've received from the department and from all educators across the state on this plan, because it's as much your plan as ours. In fact, it is ours collectively. I see this plan as a way to guide decisions, to guide implementation of policy and state law, as well as to influence policy and state law. I don't think it was a coincidence, and it certainly wasn't by design, that in yesterday's meeting, when Rowan Salisbury gave their report, they touched on the very elements of this plan: access and opportunity across racial, economic, geographic lines. And in the same way, Moore County, when they described their STEM access, touched on the very same points. And I could give credit to Dr. Townsend Smith for putting together a terrific agenda, but I think that just also shows that these issues matter. They're in the forefront of every teacher across North Carolina today. And 400 years of history has produced a terrific nation that we get to live in, a great economic force in a society, but it's also created tremendous gaps and market forces that inhibit the ability of our students to succeed. What I see in this strategic plan, this is our intentional effort to push back on those forces and to do things that will create the necessary change so that every student in North Carolina gets the education that we need them to have and that they deserve. And so my poor attempt at answering your question, Mr. Buxton, is that we'll succeed if we get to the point where there is no discernible difference in the academic achievement of our students across racial, ethnic, geographic, economic, or any other factor that might divide us, that every child in North Carolina gets the education that they deserve and we need them to get. So that's why I really support this strategic plan, and I appreciate the work that's gone into putting it together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that concludes my report on the strategic plan.
Great, we'll look forward to voting on it. We'll now turn to the Healthy Responsible Students Committee, and chair of that committee, Mr. Keenan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm Reginald Keenan, served on the HRS committee, and my vice chair and good buddy there, Ms. Alan Dinkins. Always good to be with him. And this morning we have a presentation going to be by Dr. Ellen Essick, and it's going to be from the Whole Child Advisory Committee recommendations. And with that, Dr. Essick, good morning, and take over from here.
Thank you so much. Chairman Davis, Vice Chairman Duncan, nice to be here with all of you board members today, and to bring you the recommendations from the Whole Child North Carolina Committee. And this is a group of folks who have been meeting, and I'll talk more about the history of that for a while, to bring forth recommendations around creating a sound basic education with some of those non-academic barriers, and we'll talk some about those. This committee exists of folks from other state agencies, people from here at DPI, from other state-level, community-based types of organizations, all who have been working to bring recommendations not just to you, but to other state agencies as well about what we can do to address some of those non-academic barriers. So just to give you an overview of how I'll break this down today, we're going to try to provide a context of North Carolina students by the numbers, and I'll give you a little bit of data that you've seen there, and certainly we have more if you'd like. We'll provide a report on the activities to date and the recommendations to you from the Whole Child NC Committee. And then we're going to ask you for some input to actually have some discussion here today and tell this committee where it can go from here and where you'd like us to direct the work. So just some of the numbers of our students. You can look at these. Usually I'd tell you percentages. Today I thought I'll give you, here's a class of 30. Here's how it would look like in North Carolina from a class of 30. So for example, the percentage of students who felt sad or hopeless every day for greater than 2 weeks in a row, which is definition of depression. In a class of 30, that's almost 9 students who feel that depressed. You'll notice there that seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months. And these are high school students, self-reported data from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. That's 4.9, almost 5 students say they've seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. That rate has gone up steadily. We've just been hearing more and more from the CDC among African American students. And our data, that's the only group that has continued to go steadily up in North Carolina data. So that's a new trend that we're just hearing more and more about, but I think it's important for you to hear that as well as we talk about our direction moving forward. Ever taken prescription medicine without a prescription? Again, we are one of the top states in the country for students that have done that. That's 4.5 students per 30. It's not just about whether students have taken prescription medication or not, but we know that the opioid epidemic is affecting their families, which ultimately affects them in the classroom as well. And then just one, there we go. Did not eat breakfast in the last 7 days at school. So out of 30 students, almost 20 don't eat breakfast before they come to school in the mornings. These are high school students in North Carolina, their self-reported data. If you'd like more data about our students, we have a lot of it. This is just a snapshot, and we'd be happy to share more of that data with you over time as well. As Dr. Townsend Smith said earlier, this work fits so closely with your goals, your current goals, and your future goals and objectives. It especially fits well with the state board goals around every student is healthy, safe, and responsible. And everywhere we go, we shout these goals to folks and say just how important it is for you all to make sure that students are healthy, safe, and responsible. This work shows your commitment to ensuring that all students do have a sound basic education and that we can address some of those non-academic barriers. Also, this work, I think, addresses some of the issues of equity, and I would be remiss if I didn't show equity from a health education perspective. Many of you have seen the different images of equity, but we know that students who are physically active do better in school, and we have to have equitable opportunities for them to be physically active as well. So here's what the policy sets forth for us to bring to you. Established in September of 2015 as an advisory committee to the State Board of Education. This interagency advisory committee is now called Whole Child NC. It identifies and reviews the challenges of at-risk school-age populations such as poverty, safety, health, and other non-academic barriers. And then the goal of this work is to make recommendations to you, the State Board of Education, and to other state agencies and education stakeholder groups as to how to best facilitate that access for a sound basic education for all students. In 2016, you passed the Whole Child Resolution, putting your support behind the whole school, whole community, whole child framework or model as a framework for our schools to use. They're very familiar. They do use the work. Around that same time, we got 11 districts with no promise of anything other than some pats on the back to work with us and look at their data and say, and all of these districts, by the way, were oversampled for the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. So they have county level data of what I showed you earlier, in addition to dropout data, attendance data, those kinds of things. And we're asking these districts to really take a look at what could they do on a big level, a policy level to make some changes in their district. I think, Vice Chair Duncan, you were here, it was your first meeting when 2 of the districts came and talked about some of their work early on. So we're continuing to work with these districts, and just in spite of not having a lot of funding, or actually any funding, they are working hard and continuing the good work. So a little history so we can get to the recommendations. The committee has met quarterly since 2017. It created a mission and vision statement, and as most recently, we've prioritized our work, or the work of the committee, into 3 areas. I will say it has been a lot of voting, consensus building, getting to, there are a lot of things that we want to address as a committee. And one of the ways to do that is to prioritize. This committee will be coming to you periodically, indefinitely, I'm assuming, based on the policy. So these are just the starting points for us. Those 3 areas that came to the top: leadership, engagement, buy-in, and support. Welcoming family engagement culture, and coordination of preventive services. Today, I'll be bringing you recommendations on 2 of those: leadership and family engagement. Prevention services is a big elephant, and the committee's not ready to have a recommendation yet. We're working hard to get something that is meaningful and can really make a difference in the lives of our students. So we'll continue to work on that, and you'll see that recommendation at a later date. As I go through these recommendations, instead of me just saying, "So what do you think?" here's what I'd like you to think about. Some clarifying questions. As we go through these, what would help you better understand these recommendations that we could bring back to you as a committee? What did you really like? What are you still wondering? Or what kind of information do you still need? And then what types of resources either currently exist or we're going to need to make sure that these recommendations that the committee is able to follow through with these recommendations. So here we go. Here's what the committee has come to. The first recommendation under leadership, to develop program approval requirements and communications that will focus educator prep programs for principals, superintendents, teachers, and support staff on the whole school, whole community, whole child model, enabling students to have access to a sound basic education. The steps that the committee is suggesting to do this is, first of all, would be to create a draft change to TCED 015, the administrator prep policy. Starting with administrators, because those are the folks that need to understand the need. And this would be part of that preparation program. We would then, if you approve this recommendation to move forward with this, we would take it to Pepsi, to rules, get some language together for you to think about and approve for changing the policy. And then most importantly, develop a communication plan so that institutes of higher ed understand what we're asking them to educate their administrators about. So this is number 1. You can think on those questions and we'll come back to those. The second area is family engagement. The recommendation is to identify a measure of family engagement for the school report card within 3 years. We know that's a lofty recommendation and goal, but one of the challenges that we have quite often is people say, what's family engagement? And so our first step as a committee would be to define family engagement. What does that look like in North Carolina? What do we consider that to be? And some of that's looking at the literature, doing a lit review, finding out what are best practices in family engagement, what kinds of metrics are out there for family engagement, just making sure that we're consistent with what the literature and the research is saying today. Also, we'd like to use those 11 pilot districts that we have and ask them what family engagement looks like to them. What does it mean here in North Carolina to say that the families in your school community are engaged with the work that you do? And that's different everywhere, and that's why it's so good to see a broad perspective across the state. And then finally, the PTA currently is working on a report that looks at the role of the school report card and what families think about that. And so they'll have some information back from some surveys they're doing that can be added to this work to help inform what that measure would look like for the school report card. So that's number 2. The one need that we're seeing, and I say this to you every time I see you, but I'm going to say it one more time, that we need some overarching implementation support, funding some work around the whole school, whole community child, whole child consultant here at DPI, somebody that can oversee the work and keep the recommendations moving forward. The picture in front of you is my colleague in Tennessee. In the state of Tennessee, she recently was a keynote for us here at our annual SHAC meeting. In Tennessee, the General Assembly funds a school health coordinator in every district. So they're able to do some pretty amazing work because they have a funded position. We'd like to have one funded position here, and then we can move out. I mean, obviously the big ask would be we'd love that. Currently, a lot of our folks at the district level do a whole lot of things. You know, the healthful living coordinator is also the driver ed coordinator and also the arts education coordinator and any other curriculum area that gets put in their direction. So those are, I wanted to quickly get to conversation. Questions that, and I'm here, but also Dr. Stegall, who's helping lead this work, Ms. Lynch-Ebert, other folks are here in the audience that also were part of creating these recommendations. So I wanted to see if we could, there are any questions you have, things you like about it, wonders?
Any comments from the board members?
Dr. Essick, I know that the committee, the whole child committee, is comprised of a number of different individuals representing a number of different agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Could you address whether or not the Department of Health and Human Services is having these same types of conversations around children and families with regard to the services that they provide? We know intrinsically that they're linked. Counselors, social workers, nurses, all of the efforts put together, but with a plan solely focused with the responsibility, and some might call it a burden, I call it an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Opportunity to serve students in a better way. It seems to me that we should not be the only entity asking for responsibility for all of these students. So, in a succinct question, what's going on at DHHS?
Well, I can't speak for DHHS completely, but I can say that probably a third of the members on this committee are DHHS representatives. So they're folks from many different areas of the agency there. That's one of the things that this group can do. They can make recommendations for DHHS to follow through on as well. These happen to be ones that the state board could move forward on, but that's the task of the group, is for any recommendations that we think would help. I can just anecdotally from my own collaborations, we collaborate quite a bit with many of the folks over there, particularly around school nursing areas that are closer to their work in the NC Healthy School section. But I can't speak to their overall work. They have been working on their NC 30 Healthy People North Carolina 2030 plan, and we've been part of those conversations, which has been great because it keeps them from putting measures on that aren't realistic or don't fit with education. So I think there's a lot of collaboration that folks don't see because it's going on behind the scenes. In terms of big picture decisions they make, I think that's up to them.
And I see that and I understand that, but I know while the state works with limited dollars, it seems to me if once we develop our set metrics and our ask, when we go back to our strategic plan, that if we can align with the Department of Health and Human Services, that we could collaborate on the use of those dollars to impact the same student and family demographic. Double bang for our buck, so to speak. So I don't know how we encourage that collaboration, but getting folks on the same page to understand that instead of dipping from 2 pots of money, we would be using those pots of money to have the greatest impact in one area.
I'm sorry, but I just have to completely second everything that you just said. I mean, Ms. White, I'm coming into my role on the state board cold, but I'm coming in from 23 years in the classroom and in schools. And one of the things that every educator and every school leader knows is that the non-academic factors have such a huge impact upon students, in particular as a parent who just had a child who is in elementary school. I moved from a high school lens to a kindergarten elementary lens recently. I attended my child's first day in elementary school, and I could see the opportunity gaps in the classroom on the very first day. And so in some of my conversations about the 5-year strategic plan, I've been asking, why isn't mandatory preschool part of our model in North Carolina? Like, why is it that we don't have a compulsory preschool opportunity that establishes a baseline of equity for every child? I mean, we have kids coming in kindergarten who have never held a crayon, don't know the letters, have tremendous opportunity gaps, and we begin addressing those opportunity gaps in kindergarten. And I know that DHS, I understand there are tremendous funding resources, but good gracious, the benefits, the return on investment of investing in kids is so much greater than on the back end when we try to remediate in high school, or we try to create job placement opportunities for young adults, or we have the criminal justice system. Why don't we have a commitment to making sure that every child who enters kindergarten has pre-K opportunities, and not virtual pre-K opportunities? I mean, like legit pre-K opportunities. I wondered if that's something that the whole child framework and that your committee had any recommendations on. And also just with regards to like your ask, like we would love to have a school health coordinator in every county. What would that cost, and why aren't we doing it? Because when we talk about return on investment, that seems to me an obvious ask.
It seems an obvious ask.
If Tennessee
Yes.
can do it, why can't North Carolina do it?
Exactly.
I'd like to know that.
I think that's a fair question.
I will sort of echo Mrs. White in another direction, and that is the involvement with folks that are representing EPPs on your committee. And since this leadership recommendation is focused there, have you had some input or voices around the table to begin that recommendation?
The major folks involved in that group are they're a superintendent from a local district that's part of that conversation.
So we have not reached out in any way to any of the EPPs on this topic at this point?
No.
A lot of work to be done there.
Follow up on that,
Maybe.
since this is the recommendation in front of us. Are there models of educator prep programs with their administrative school leader, teacher? The committee says, this is what we'd like to see in North Carolina, and then the related clarifying question is, what specifically is the committee thinking principal or teacher candidate is gonna have coming out on the whole school, whole child, whole community model that better prepares them?
I think in terms of models, the committee can certainly research those and find if there are some folks that are doing really good work on preparing those educators and administrators coming in. Our first and probably I think the committee's first thought is folks are coming in and don't even know these are issues. So it's beginning with awareness. Would that be a whole course in this work? I know that the current policy asks that those folks are aware of safety issues when they come in, health and safety issues, or safety and bullying types of issues when they come in. What type of commitment? And that's something this board could make a decision about recommending. What type of commitment would you like those higher ed institutions to say this is important enough to have? I taught health methods for elementary school teachers for 18 years, and over the time I taught that, eventually those programs were watered down into one methods class for multiple types of courses, a methods class that included methods for health and art and dance, and so before long you couldn't really cover some of the major health issues in that time. So, I think it's a larger issue, but it is an issue of what do we expect those preparation programs to bring forth.
Yep.
I would also say, based on the strategic plan that we just discussed, we're talking about whole child and equity together. And if if we're going to move forward with this recommendation, I don't want to mix up the two things, but you really can't separate them. And somehow, perhaps equity could be built into that conversation and recommendation that we ask for some change
Absolutely.
on that level.
Sure.
Dr. Essex, what did you mention earlier about the suicide? You said about Afro-Americans. Didn't you say something about percentage in your presentation?
Oh, I said that in a class of 30, I think almost five students have said that they've seriously considered suicide in the last 12 months. A recent study came out from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey data from the Centers for Disease Control showing particularly among a 60% increase among African American males in the answer to that question, saying that they had seriously considered suicide. And our trend data with our Youth Risk Behavior Survey here in North Carolina, those numbers have gradually risen as well.
The reason that catches my attention because I'm going to speak back from my life when I was growing up. In my community, the word suicide was a taboo. I mean, it was inconceivable that in my community, that in the black population, that you even consider suicide. That was something it just wasn't one of the things that affected the community. But now you mentioned that, it's just really frightening and disturbing that it's come to that. You know?
It is disturbing, and it's relative. I think it's something that was somewhat overlooked. It just kind of happened over time, and we're realizing now just how significant that growth has been over time. So it speaks to our prevention work that we might be doing as part of Healthy Schools, but also this committee and this board as well.
I know it sounds redundant, but as we were talking about earlier, it's about the educator that leads the captain of the ship, so to speak. And that's why I just always believe that those up top got to believe, they got to buy into this. They got to buy into what we're saying here. And how you do that, we just keep on preaching the word of we're doing here, and we monitor, we check, we evaluate. And most of them, sometimes, as I say, most educators, they do care. Sometimes they don't know how. So to do better. So we have to devise a way for them to understand how to become better. And that's part of, I guess, our conversation. But I just sometimes, through my personal experiences, just feel that people haven't bought into it. And you got to do it to make it work.
I think that's been
a long process, but it's tough.
Excuse me. I think that's been work that we've been talking about for a while now. And most of my career, it's more about getting people to buy in. Because once you've got them bought in, you can teach the content. It's about getting the commitment to the work.
You know, we talk a lot about money. Money is important. I understand that. But even if you had the money, if you still don't buy into it, you still don't achieve what you need to achieve. But we definitely need some money for support. I'm not saying that, but you still have to believe what we talked about. Anyone else? Mr. Duncan?
Couple of thoughts. We've talked about resources, and specifically one of the highlights of this report is the support services for our students are not to the standards we want. And I think that we saw earlier when we were working through the budget collectively with the department that both the department and the board had pushed to try to increase the amount of services within the school districts. And my recollection is the number was to get to the national averages for nurses and psychologists and mental health workers and other support services within the schools. We were $720 million behind what the national averages are in terms of what it would cost. And so we can all take a deep breath and realize that's not an easy trip to get back to the place where we would hit on the averages. But I think this highlights, along with the strategic plan, that needs to become a real priority, and it has been for the board and needs to continue to be. And as our chair just said, we need to be consistent advocates about the needs and educators, if you will, about the needs on some of these issues, because they really make a difference. And some of these statistics that you show from the surveys bring home real quickly how significant the needs are. Second thing, I wanted to pick up on the DHHS comments a little bit, and I don't know what all their strategies are and don't know what they are, particularly once you get past early childhood. But because of a lot of early childhood development work that I do in my own community, being on a board there, I know they've been very committed to early childhood development issues and held an early childhood summit earlier this year, adopted a number of statewide and a number of recommendations to change where we are with early childhood development, set some goals, some metrics, if you will, to measure where we are and where we're going. And I don't think we can emphasize enough the significance of that, because we spent a lot of time here talking about proficiency in reading by the 3rd grade as a key marker. And one of the ways we could get there fastest is to have children ready by the time they get to kindergarten, and which is, I think, alludes to, Matt, your comment a few moments ago. And that's going to require a real different way of thinking about what we're doing with children from birth to at least to age 4, if not to age 5. I think they're thinking that way, but again, if we start to put pen to paper and look at the resources that are involved in that work, it's going to come out at a daunting number if you start to do the math. So I think, you know, it's not our area. Birth's certainly not our area, but on the other hand, it totally affects what we do, as Amy, you said so well. So we need to find a way to partner and collaborate, just as our strategic plan suggests, in order to make this more cohesive, seamless process. And we need to be part of the educators on why the DHHS push for early childhood support and education has tremendous merit for our state, to try to have, we support each other in so many different ways. So,
And there is support in the Early Childhood Action Plan.
Yeah.
Secretary Cohen was here talking to
Yes.
you all, providing you some of that. So they are thinking in the same direction. It's about how do we then continue to move that work forward, I think.
And how do we educate to get the resources, because the resources will be what anyone would consider significant, I think.
And I'd like to make it abundantly clear, because I know we have media professionals that often lift comments and they appear perhaps in or out of context. I was not in any way pointing fingers at the Department of Health and Human Services for the tremendous work that they do, merely asking the question, where are we at in the spirit of collaboration, trying to meet a common goal, a shared goal, as well articulated by their department and ours.
Yeah, ditto here. I hope that I didn't put my foot in my mouth.
No finger pointing.
Dr. Essick, question for you. You mentioned adding family engagement as a possible metric on the North Carolina School Report Card. I wondered if there were any other metrics that you might recommend being added to the North Carolina School Report Card, such as Rowan yesterday presented that they're using the Panorama Social Emotional Learning Survey. That's a tool that we also use in Edgecombe County, and it gives us a metric for understanding young people's social emotional learning health. I wondered if that was something that you might recommend. You also commented that 20 out of 30 high school students are not eating breakfast. And I wondered if that's data that you think is useful to report publicly on a school-by-school or district-by-district level, given the importance of nutrition to learning. Was there any additional data sets that you felt like might need to be added to this school report card other than kind of the academic and staffing data we currently do?
I think the committee could probably come up with quite a few, honestly. Personally, I think I'd have to think about those ramifications of adding different types of measures to the report card. In terms of the data, I would also say that is self-reported data of students, of high school students, who may have access to breakfast and not choose to eat it. So I think we would need to look with Dr. Lynn Harvey and look at the data of how many students actually have access to and availability of breakfast during the day. I don't want to just make up measures for the school health report for the school report card, but I think the committee could certainly go back and look at other measures like social emotional learning and see if there's some other things that might fit on there as well.
Jamie?
First, I want to know if my kid said she didn't have access to breakfast, because she never eats it, but it's available.
Yeah.
I want to make sure. I just want to give you specific feedback to what you brought to us, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, if that's okay
Thank
with you. I like this measure. I think our strategic plan was clear about not trying to boil the ocean and having 300 measures, and our advisors mentioned that. So to the degree that this is the measure you all think is important, my feedback would be, this is a pretty clear process. Let's start that process and start looking at what that could look like. I have some wonders about the teacher prep and leader prep. I think moving straight to policy and putting program approval requirements in before we have good models that create buy-in that people would want to move on can have the opposite effect. And we can get very thin implementation that just meets the letter of the program approval requirement. And so my recommendation would be just some more work in understanding what folks may be trying to do, what's going on around the country that we think is especially strong. Is there some community of practice step we could do to get these EPPs to start doing, and then we'd have something that we want to take through a program approval. I think we'd get deeper buy-in if we have that first.
Absolutely, sounds good.
And then the last one, because you had a consultant, I just, Superintendent has talked a number of times about the importance of the regional support model to our approach to supporting. I'm just wondering if we need some individuals, maybe more than one for the agency. Do we have expertise that can help each of our regional support teams on the whole child model to the degree that we're finding districts want that support from the districts that you've already been working? It may go beyond just the one.
Yes, and our team is always available to help those folks in the regional, as part of the regional support process to learn more about this work. And we also are working with school health advisory councils from across the state that are required per your policy and all 116 LEAs. So we are doing education across the state. Is it as in-depth as it needs to be? We don't have the capacity to do that, but we can certainly provide more.
Yeah, I'm suggesting you ask for a few more than one. That's what I'm suggesting.
I think there was actually probably 8 asked for in your budget request that you sent forward earlier.
Thank you. Good morning. One of the hats that I am, I guess, fortunate enough to wear is I'm chairman of Pepsi as well. And so I would like to try to help you with this. So when you bring us a recommendation, to piggyback on Mr. Buxton said, it needs to be a fleshed out recommendation, and probably before the policy recommendation can occur, we would need that. So if you'll reach out to us, we have many members representing different EPPs on Pepsi, and we can help you with that work.
That sounds great. Well, take that back to the committee. We'd be happy to do a little more homework. Sure.
Anyone else? Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Dr. Essick, at the risk of offering a suggestion that you're already doing, which usually is my luck, we'd be glad to the extent you want to share these recommendations you're bringing to us, that your committee share with our partner groups. These are the recommendations you're bringing to the state board, and vice versa. We'd love to be better informed about similar recommendations that might be going to DHHS or other groups. And we'd also be willing to entertain recommendations that are of a combined or joint nature that would help us create that sort of partnership that Ms. White was referring to.
I think we can certainly bring those to you. And we do work well with DHHS, but we could certainly work together to make sure we're bringing some joint recommendations in addition to these, because there was representation as part of this work.
Perfect.
From there. So.
Anyone else? If not, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Keenan. We'll now take a 10-minute break until 11 o'clock. All right, we're on break.
I sit here and sweat for 10 minutes.
Nope. Yep. Give you a chance to think through it.
Usually takes minimum of 10 and often 15 to get them, to actually get people starting.
We want to get out of here.
Follow-up
That's right.
conversation with the audience.
Except there's that lunch.
Or other board members or whatever. We're unavoidable.
That's right.
But then there's also the thing downstairs. Did you get it? I mean, I think she was saying pick up your lunch up here and go down there.
I can't get tired of stuff.
All right, we are back in session, and our next committee report is the Business Operations Committee, and I'll turn to our Vice Chair, Mr. Duncan, Chair of the Business Operations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Alan Duncan, and along with Todd Chastain, my colleague and friend, we serve as the leaders of the Business Operations Committee. We have a few items today. The first one's an action on first reading for approval of contracts over $1 million. You will recall, consistent with board policy, a contract that comes to the board for in excess of $1 million is to be approved by the board. And we've got 2 contracts which are in your materials. Have not heard any questions on either one of them. Does anyone have any questions on those contracts before we vote on them today? All right, seeing negative shakes of the head, let me move on then to Business Operations Committee item number 2. State Board of Education policy amendment, and this goes to the early grade reading proficiency allotments, and Alexis Schaus is here to guide us through the necessary amendments.
Thank you. This is related to the early grade reading proficiency funding that goes out to the school districts specifically that are allotted out there. The current policy provides the funding for $400 for every allotted teacher in K-3 to fund the devices. This adds flexibility on the use of those funds for those school districts that have one-to-one devices, and they are allowed to provide use that funding for devices, accessories, literacy personnel to support the program. So that is the current amendment on that.
Questions or comments? Yes,
I'm
Mr.
just,
Boxer.
Mr. Chairman, just reading along with this, it's also, am I right, Ms. Schaus, the high-quality curriculum and professional learning aligned, is that right?
You are correct.
Okay, good.
Yes,
I just
sir.
want to make sure. Mr. Chairman, in our framework for K-3 reading that we pass as a board, making some of these allotments more flexible, aligned with best practice in reading, was one of the things we as a board had talked about. So I think this is a good step. I'd be interested if we know anything about how much flexibility will be, what we know about the number of devices already out there, how the iPads in the warehouse will address the gap, and then what will be left over that districts will feel like they don't need to buy a device and so they'll have access. Do you have any sense of the order of magnitude of flexibility districts will get here?
I do not have that information, but perhaps Tara may have that information. We can get that to you.
Okay. Dr. Galloway's involved in training today, but we will take that request and come back and report to the board, at least by way of an email, to get a response to that specific informational request.
Great, and I just want to put in a plug that the opportunity for Superintendent Miller to say, I've got enough devices, now I'd like to support a reading coach who can work with my K-3 teachers, or I can have a high-quality curriculum aligned to stand. I just think this is a great move for our district partners in trying to move our goal on.
Right, and I think the board has expressed that sentiment previously, and this language would tend to help that process, but we should get some further clarity in terms of what's there, what we have and what we might perceive as the needs. Any other questions or comments on that? Thank you for that one. All right, not seeing any. We'll go to our update on contracts report. You have received the listing of executed contracts for the past month, and also the planned contracts that are in process but not finalized at this point. Are there any questions or comments on any of those? Anyone has? All right, occasionally we have them. It's a good month. We don't have any this month. That's great. As everyone will recall, the board has requested an update on an agency vacancy report, and we have started getting that report in the last 3 months or so from Ms. Melissa Warner, who heads our human resources groups right now. You should have that report. And is Ms. Warner here?
She's on her way.
She's on her way. All right, well, while she's on her way, let's cover the 2 consent items then and make good use of our time. Biz Op 3 is certification of NCLEA finance officers. We have this item every month. This month we have 3 proposed approvals for finance officers. They are set out in your materials, and so that will be a consent item. Biz Op 4 is also a consent item, although probably requires a short explanation. You'll recall at our last meeting the revisions for we had the USDA Fresh Fruits and Vegetable Program grant, which was good news. We got a grant for a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables. And the board there was an application process, and the board had a set of priorities that were brought out in a listing of what schools would receive the grant money. This is a revision to that, and the revision is because 2 schools in Surrey County who are on the list are not going to be open this year because the construction work that was being done on those schools is taking longer than expected, so they will not be in a position to accept that this year. And in Robinson County, there has been a consolidation of some schools, and so with respect to the consolidation, the students who were to receive it will still receive it, but there is a change in the number of schools where that would go. So as a result of that, 3 new schools who are the next 3 in terms of the priority grading that was done that you see listed will come forward and will be the ones that will receive the next 3 grants because they were the ones who scored the highest in the application process, the next 3 up. So we thought it's a consent item because it was worked out well. The board had approved the rubric for how we got here, but I did feel like we need to explain why there was a change. Any questions or comments on that, and are we happy for that to stay on consent? I'm seeing nods, so thank you for that. We'll keep that on consent. Then that'll leave us just with our last item, which is the agency vacancy report. Ms. Warner here yet?
She's vacant.
Waiting on an elevator.
We can all relate.
That brings us to capital improvements. No,
I'll be happy to get it started, and hopefully she'll be here in time to answer any of your questions.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
And welcome. So glad to have you back here at the podium. We really,
Thank you very much.
Very glad for that.
I'm blessed to be here. Thank you. So the vacancies that the HR department has been working hard on, approximately 109 that are segregated as DPI or SBE vacancies. So it's a little bit less than the full total that we were showing you prior months because we wanted to break it out for you so you could see that 54 of them are actually residential schools in NCAT. So you can see on this slide, 51 of them are in residential schools. So we felt it was important to show you that DPI proper and the state board only has a total of 109. And those are all in various stages of HR's working hard on processing. And here's the breakdown as you all asked for by division. As you can see the breakdown there for the board, the different deputy superintendent areas, and the superintendent's office. So that leads to the grand total for 163. But we also thought it was important to point out that there are a lot of temporaries working against those vacancies, so it's not that 163 jobs are not getting done. A lot of people are working hard to fulfill those, but we also do have temporaries that are helping out in the building. This is the report that you're accustomed to seeing, where each month they show which positions are in what process, what stage throughout the HR process. And I can tell you they're working furiously to try to get these all the way through the process, but it does take some time. We're on a freeze right now with positions and being able to have our reclasses and salary adjustments. So until the budget passes, we have some delays there. But other than that, they're moving quickly through the process. Has she joined?
That was one. That was one question I think we had, and then I think the board is aware there are some freeze issues right now on some of these positions. You may not know the exact number. Do you have some sense of what the number is on the freeze situation until we have the budget situation become clearer?
The freeze on the salaries is on everybody. The freeze on the positions are just the ones that were identified in either the House or the Senate. I don't remember that number, 50-some maybe, right around there.
Okay.
But the other freeze is on the reclassification process, because we don't have the authority to do that without going through OSHR currently.
And that affects all employees, as you
All
said.
positions,
And so we should be aware of that and sensitive to that fact.
Hopefully we'll have a budget soon.
I think you speak on behalf of all employees in that regard.
Absolutely.
All right, do we have any other questions or comments on the report? Yes, please. Chair Davis.
Ms. Warner's done some terrific work at improving both the visibility of this report and the process of staffing. And so one, I want to give her kudos to that. And two, it might help without creating an overly burdensome reporting, but just to have an idea of how long it's taking us to get positions filled and through the process. You know, what we measure, we tend to improve. And so building on the success that she's having in this, maybe in future reports, give some consideration to how long is it taking us to get positions filled will further shine the light on how the process is being improved.
You're absolutely right, and that is a very common performance metric for HR departments. Ours currently doesn't have those metrics, and we're working on those. You should be able to see turnover rates. That's a common metric. So we are working with the HR department to develop those measures and then start reporting them accurately.
Thanks.
We got a ways to go there.
And then because we're not in the business world and we do have things like freezes that apply, we'll have to modify those metrics to at least show where freezes apply as opposed to a situation in which it's in process. So, other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much for ably pitching in. Mr. Chair, that completes our report.
Thank you, Mr.
very
Duncan.
much.
We're going to pick up an item that we delayed from yesterday's agenda in the Educator Standards and Practice Committee, and for that item, I'll turn to the Vice Chair, Ms. White.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I'm Amy White, and I am the Vice Chair for Educator Standards and Practices. Dr. Olivia Oxendine serves as the chair of this committee, and she had to be away from the board table, so I'm happy to fill in today for her. While you go back to yesterday's meeting, because there are materials there, I just want to talk you through this item. In 2016, because of Senate Bill 599 and the state board policy, North Carolina began a state partnership with the Council for the Accreditation of Educator Prep. And they provide supports for educator prep programs, program review, assessment tools, accountability processes. But since that partnership in 2016, another agency for a second area for national accreditation has come forward, and that's the accreditation of quality educator prep. And since May, we've been working with them to develop another state-level partnership. And so they are here today. Actually, I'd like to introduce Dr. Teresa Coogan, who is going to walk us through what that proposal will mean for the state board to review and consider for yet another opportunity for educator prep programs to reach accreditation. Dr. Coogan.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Davis, Dr. Oxendine, Superintendent Johnson, Ms. White, and members of the North Carolina State Board of Education for your time today. I recognize that this is a shift in your agenda, so I am going to truly cut to the chase and give you a snapshot of what we're here to talk about today. So the big picture here is that this item is coming to the board in response to an invitation that we received to begin a state-level partnership agreement with AQEP in May of this year. There are two national programmatic accreditation agencies that are available, CAPE being one of them and AQEP now being the the second that is available for folks. There is nothing in policy or law that is inhibiting state level partnership with both agencies. You do have a comprehensive PowerPoint package available to you and supplemental materials to provide a big picture overview of what National Educator Preparation Accreditation is, as well as some additional supplemental materials to really put that all in context. Please do note that the voice of our EPPs throughout the state have been captured in the presentation as well. When I joined DPI last year, I brought knowledge, well, I do bring knowledge and experience in higher education, both as a faculty and an administrator in higher ed. One of the content areas of specialization that I bring to this role is regarding accreditation, especially as it impacts institutions of higher education, educator preparation providers, and accreditation in general for specialized programs. I was tasked by my director to provide state-level service as an accreditation consultant and liaison in July of last year. In doing so, I immediately had the opportunity to engage with all of our EPPs throughout the state, learning more about the good work that they're doing, opening up communication lines, and engaging in interactive conversations with them about the quality training that they have in place. So their conversations, the conversations that we've had, the different meetings that we've had, the different types of outreach have all been captured and have been summarized here. What we're looking at with accreditation is, for the state of North Carolina, is a completely optional and voluntary decision by the EPPs. A point of clarification that I wanted to share with folks regarding the public institutions is that I have reviewed the UNC system code and I consulted with the UNC system office administrators. It has been verified that the UNC system office does value and is interested in accreditation, but there is nothing that is stated that mandates our public institutions must participate in CAPE. I learned that that was a point of clarification that I wanted to offer. According to our policy and law, folks can choose to join and or withdraw from participation in accreditation at any time while they're holding their state board approval status. At this time, we have 67% of our EPPs currently choosing to participate in national accreditation. And in both agencies are represented right now, and this is going across publics and private institutions. So everybody is eligible and everybody is interested. One of the things that I wanted to highlight with regard to these agencies, and to be very clear, is that I am encouraging the board to consider continuing to maintain the partnership that they have with CAPE. For some of our EPPs, this partnership with CAPE is the best fit for the way that they are structured, the way that they are operating. It supports them best to do their quality preparation and work. For other EPPs in our state, the AQEP framework is a better fit for them. So what we would be doing by engaging in 2 state partnership opportunities would be opening up inclusive opportunities for the EPPs throughout our state to make the choice of what's the best fit for you in order to have a framework to guide the quality work and training and preparation that you're doing. I can share a few differences and similarities between what the frameworks are, but those are sort of the big picture highlights, and as quickly as I can summarize them for you, given the shift in our schedule.
Thank you, Dr. Coogan. Questions from my board members about this particular item? Okay, this is thank you. This is an item for new business, so we won't be voting on this today. As you reflect and have extended time to review what's included on the PowerPoint, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Coogan. It'll be back before us for action next month.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, this concludes the report for today.
Thank you, Ms. White. Before we move to voting on items, we have 2 more matters that need to be brought to the board's attention as actions on first reading, and I'll turn to Dr. Townsend Smith and Mr. Eric Snyder to present those items to the board.
Good morning again. As we are getting set up, part of my responsibility for you is keeping a close eye on your policy manual and making recommendations as to changes, etc. So today, I stand before you with a proposal to eliminate SBOP 010 As this policy is labeled SBE late agenda items, I am proposing that we eliminate this policy to reduce duplication and redundancy. Basically, the language in SBOP 010 and the language that we just amended in SBOP 006, they are the language mirrors each other. So I just think that having an extra policy outlining late items is unnecessary. So I recommend that you eliminate this policy as it is not needed, and ask if you have any questions or concerns about that recommendation.
Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Superintendent Johnson, board members. While Deanna gets to be the deregulator today, telling you asking for your permission to get rid of a policy, I want to talk to you and end with a grand finale on administrative rulemaking. This morning, Cecilia talked a little bit about House Bill 362, which recently went into effect. And what it does is it gives this board an opportunity to move some of its existing policies into the administrative code in a new way, a tweaked way that will provide greater stability for our school systems, greater clarity to folks who are reading our rules, and should save the department some work in that we'll actually be able to avoid some of the typical steps that go into the permanent rulemaking process. So to quickly set the table, board members, you'll recall that a previous iteration of this board sought clarity in the courts about the extent to which the Administrative Procedure Act applied to the kinds of directives that you work through here at the board table. In particular, that previous iteration of the board brought that suit because it wanted the agency and the board to be nimble and to respond with its rules and directives in a way that went around that lengthy, time-consuming process of administrative rules. Well, last summer, you'll recall that the divided North Carolina Supreme Court clarified the position of the state that, in fact, we do need to follow administrative rulemaking for certain actions that you undertake. And shortly thereafter, our General Assembly recognized that there needed to be a transition time for your existing policy manual to have portions of it migrate into the administrative code. And so you'll recall that House Bill 374 gave you that time and set forth a sort of a unique way for the board and for DPI to make that migration. Certainly it was a great piece of foresight for the board, for the General Assembly to provide that transition time, and we appreciated it, but it was really not enough time. So folks here within the agency and the board have advocated for some additional time to help make some of those transitions, and we've seen that come to fruition here with House Bill 362. As I mentioned, we do get some additional time, which we're taking advantage of here. There's also a slightly different process for how these rules will move from your existing policy manual to the administrative code. Okay, so you'll recall when we started digesting the bill from last year, we worked with the board office staff and DPI leaders worked through your existing policies to identify some to move through permanent rulemaking, and we had a called meeting in April to move a number of those interim rules into the permanent rulemaking process. And since that time, we had 4 public hearing sessions, and we have accepted written comments from folks in the field on these particular policies that rightfully belong in the administrative code. One, to enforce the kinds of directives that this board thinks are important, but also to meet the legislature's requirement that this board in fact enact some rules on a variety of topics. So you'll see me click once, twice, and 3 times for some of these existing policies that you've already moved into the process. More recently, just on the 22nd of last month, the General Assembly gave us this new authority to move forward with this process by taking your interim rules and adopting them as emergency rules. This results in a slight tweak to the process. Effectively, what the General Assembly did last summer was confer interim rule status, which is a unique status, on your existing policies that would otherwise be subject to the administrative code, or excuse me, the Administrative Procedure Act. Here, and with this recent law, it's again conferred interim rule status on your existing policy manual and directed you to adopt as emergency rules those items that we would want to move over into the administrative code and go through the permanent rulemaking process for. The statute outlines essentially these four points. We've got until tomorrow to adopt as emergency rules those items that need to move forward to Office of Administrative Hearings. So we're going to ask for it today. That's why this item is on action for first reading. One of the unique pieces here in step 2 is that the board does not have to adopt as temporary rules those emergency rules that it adopts today. So you'll recall at your last meeting you adopted some emergency rules which were also moving forward as temporary rules. Again, it's a very administrative process, and I'm jealous of Deanna, who got to say we got to take a policy away. But in any event, by essentially placing a flag in the ground today, by adopting these rules, they continue to have sort of a heightened status in the event the agency got challenged in a lawsuit and needed to defend its actions. We have until December 6th to move forward the permanent language that we would want to put into the administrative code. So we've got some significant work to do as a board office, as a board, and as an agency to prepare your policies and sort of make the transition from how they look in your policy manual today to how they look in form in the administrative code. And then there's also sort of a deadline for actually getting those rules adopted as permanent rules, and that would be by May 30th of next year. So right now, the policies that you blessed to move forward in the permanent rulemaking process, we still think of them as interim rules. Under this new statute, we need to adopt them now as emergency rules so that we can put them on the path again. Essentially, this means for those who provided public comments and written comments, we'll have an additional amount of time for those rules that we've already had hearings on for them to be before the public again. We've also taken advantage of this additional time to identify additional existing policies that we think are interim rules and should appropriately move through the permanent rulemaking process for eventual review by the Office of Administrative Hearings and the Rules Review Commission and into the administrative code. So I'm going to click through again a couple slides, and you'll see the new ones here highlighted in yellow. So new items regarding athletic trainers, waiver for school calendar law, among others, including another charter school policy, some rules concerning our schools for the deaf and blind, our licensure policies, and some EPP policies. And so these are all on eBoard. You can take a look at them in greater detail. Board members like to end with a big bang. Do you have any questions today? Appreciate your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. So board members will now move to a vote on any items that require action from your committee reports, and we've had thorough discussions and reports on each of these items. Before moving to a vote, we'll call on Mr. Buxton. I think you have an update on SLA 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Without objection, I'd like to request that SLA 2, which is our CCRG item, be tabled until next month. Some additional work for the community college and our department to do on the math approach, and so I'd respectfully ask us to move that to the September agenda.
Okay, any questions or comments on that request? So without objection, so ordered.
Thank you.
So remind us that any item on the consent agenda is primarily not complex and may have come to the board for discussion in a prior month. Also note the board members have seen these consent items for over a week, and at this time we're actually going to vote on consent and action on first read in one vote today. So just to clarify, it's a slight change from our normal process. We'll do one vote for all items.
Mr. Chairman.
So, yes, Mr.
May I
Buck.
just confirm that, because we talked about yesterday, that we also have SLA 5 has been moved to September. I request to move that to September as well.
Yes, got that.
Okay, thank you.
So at this time, I ask for a motion to approve these items. the July 11, 2019, and June 24, 2019 meeting minutes. And then these items from your committee reports: SLA 1, 3, 4, 6, and 7. EICS 1, 2, 3, and 5. BizOp 1 through 4. And then the two items just presented, the elimination of policy SBOP-010 and the establishing emergency rules to comply with House Bill 362. And finally, our strategic plan 2025. Is there a motion to approve those items?
So move.
Motion by Mr. Ford. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Kamitz. Any questions on these items or any further discussion? Seeing none, Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes, sir. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Davis?
Yes. Thank you. The motion carries. Well, that concludes our work for this meeting. Thank you to all staff and presenters of this August 8, 2019 meeting. Board members, do you have any other items for discussion today? Then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Keenan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. White. Dr. Townsend Smith?
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Ms. Kamnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. White?
Yes.
Mr. Ford? Yes. Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. We'll see you in September. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Oh, hey.